The sky burned white with tracers, a frozen lattice of light suspended above Europe. Inside the roaring fuselage of a B-17 Flying Fortress, Sergeant Daniel Kurtz gripped the twin 50 caliber Brownings and tried to track a darting shape slicing through the contrails. Every instinct told him to lead the target, to fire ahead of the German Messerschmitt to anticipate its path, yet his bullets kept missing. The fighter flashed past untouched, the noise of its cannons punching holes in the bomber's tail. "You're shooting too far ahead!" his instructor had shouted days before on the training range. "They're not where you think they are." But in the chaos of real combat, the sky refused to obey the rules written in manuals. The suspense thickened with every second. Men screamed over the intercom, oxygen masks fogged, and Kurtz fired again, this time deliberately behind the fighter's tail, and to his shock, the Messerschmitt erupted in flame. The impossible had happened. News of this strange success raced through bomber squadrons like wildfire. How could shooting behind an enemy plane destroy it faster than leading the target? Pilots and gunners debated the mystery in canteens and debriefing tents. Some called it luck, others heresy. Yet statistical reports told the same story. Certain crews, those who adjusted their aim backward, were suddenly doubling their kill ratios. The Air Force launched frantic investigations. Film from gun camera reels was slowed frame by frame, revealing something no instructor had anticipated: the optical illusion of closure speed. At 300 miles per hour, the difference between where the gunner saw the enemy and where the enemy actually was amounted to only fractions of a second, but that second meant everything. The discovery overturned years of aerial gunnery doctrine and hinted at a terrifying truth: the human eye was too slow for modern war. Engineers at Wright Field and instructors at Las Vegas Gunnery School began redesigning the entire training philosophy. Instructors forced rookies to unlearn instinct, to aim where logic screamed they should not. Charts covered blackboards showing relative motion, bullet drop, and convergence zones. Film projectors simulated the erratic dance of fighters so trainees could feel the dissonance between sight and reality. Men cursed, argued, and laughed nervously when told that success meant trusting mathematics over muscle memory. The suspense of those lessons was almost physical. Each trainee wondered if he would ever react correctly when death streaked toward him at 400 miles per hour. But when live-fire exercises began, the results were undeniable. By intentionally lagging their fire, aiming behind, gunners hit more often. Science had rewritten instinct, and the air war would never be the same. Yet the revelation was bittersweet. Veteran crews, returning from missions, described the eerie calm that followed once they mastered the technique. Enemy fighters seemed to fly straight into invisible nets of bullets, as if fate itself had been recalibrated. But with efficiency came detachment. Men no longer felt they were fighting opponents. They were executing equations. The same sky that once felt infinite had become a laboratory, measured in angles and milliseconds. As one instructor muttered while watching film of burning fighters, "We finally learned how to win, by shooting where they've already been." The hook tightened for the viewer. If war could be reduced to numbers, what happened to the men who lived inside them? At the training ranges in the Nevada desert, heat shimmered over rows of stationary bomber turrets mounted on platforms. Instructors barked orders through megaphones while fresh crews, barely out of high school, squinted at moving targets that glided across cables in the distance. Each man had heard the strange rumor from Europe: don't lead your fire, lag it. The notion clashed with everything they'd been taught. Old-school pilots scoffed. Engineers took notes. Then came the demonstration. A flight of fighters dived across the range, and trainees opened fire with synchronized electric guns linked to film cameras. When the reels were developed, the instructors played them frame by frame. Every student who had aimed behind registered clean hits. Everyone who had led too far ahead scored nothing. The room fell silent except for the whir of the projector. "Gentlemen," the instructor said dryly, "you've just seen the difference between habit and physics." The suspense in that dusty classroom was thicker than the desert. Heat. The military turned the revelation into an experiment that would rewrite doctrine. Engineers at the Army Air Force Proving Ground began developing an adjustable sight that could compensate automatically for the closing speed between attacker and target. The first prototypes looked ungainly, small gyroscopes spinning, behind glass reticles, but they promised to solve the problem that had haunted every gunner since 1940. Tests paired rookies with veterans, Both were told to shoot simulated enemy aircraft projected on screens, while a camera recorded the impact points. The gyroscopic sight predicted the enemy's future position by sensing turn rate and angular velocity. For the first time, human reaction was supplemented by mechanical foresight. Crews who had once sprayed ammunition wildly across the sky began to conserve bursts, waiting for the perfect alignment, then firing short, surgical volleys. Each demonstration ended with applause, muted but sincere, because the numbers spoke louder than pride. Accuracy rates doubled, sometimes tripled, and the phrase "aim behind" became less superstition, more science. But understanding the technique and believing in it were different things. Combat veterans, hardened by months of loss, distrusted gadgets. They had seen technology fail, guns jam, instruments freeze. The idea that a spinning gyroscope could read an enemy's mind felt absurd. Yet orders came directly from command. Trust the sight, not your gut. Instructors staged psychological drills to break the old habits. They dimmed lights, played combat recordings at full volume, and forced gunners to track projected aircraft using only the reticle's moving dot. When the system worked, the reaction was always the same. First disbelief, then exhilaration, then silence. The men understood that they were witnessing a transformation of warfare itself. They were no longer guessing. They were cooperating with a machine that could predict chaos. The suspense built inwardly. Could they surrender instinct without surrendering humanity? The first missions using the new doctrine were flown over the English Channel in late 1944, crews equipped with gyro-stabilized sights and retrained to lag their aim-faced incoming. Luftwaffe fighters that attacked in coordinated waves. The gunners waited, nerves taut, until the sight's glowing dot slid behind each target. Short bursts, 2 seconds at most, flashed through the gray morning. One by one, enemy aircraft flared, broke apart, and tumbled. Radio chatter was stunned, clipped, professional. Tail gunner claims 2. Left waist, 1 confirmed. The statistics that followed shocked command. Casualty ratios had shifted overnight. It was as if the bombers had grown invisible shields of mathematics. In debriefing tents that evening, one sergeant tried to describe the feeling. "You don't shoot where he's going," he said, staring at his trembling hands. "You shoot where he was, and he flies into it anyway." The suspense lingered for viewers. If prediction could replace instinct here, where else would war let machines think for men? News traveled faster than usual through the bomber command. The lag shoot method and the gyroscopic sight were not quirks but game changers. Squadron after squadron swapped field reports, film reels, and nervous jokes in mess tents. Pilots in briefing rooms leaned forward as gunners described the eerie feeling of watching an enemy fly into a curtain of lead that didn't exist a second before. Commanders who had once measured success in inches of structural integrity and men in the seat returned with different metrics on paper: hit ratios, shortened engagements, and fewer fighters getting away. Tacticians who'd spent years theorizing about defensive boxes, tight formations, and mutual support now had a new variable to fold into plans: precision defensive fire that didn't rely on overwhelming volume. Bomber groups began reorganizing their approach patterns, rehearsal drills, and even radio discipline to exploit the synergy between human sight, mechanical prediction, and doctrinal patience. The suspense in those hangars and on those pads grew palpable. Every new mission could either justify the faith they'd put in the sight or expose it as another wartime folly. On the flight line, maintenance crews became unsung architects of survivability. Gyro gun sights were delicate. Precision instruments that required careful calibration and gentle hands. A jolt on a rough field, a warped mount, a poorly aligned reticle, any of these could turn the miracle of mathematical prediction into wasted rounds. Ground crews, often overlooked and underpaid, learned to treat the sights like newborns, adjusting balance weights, cleaning gyroscope housings, tightening mounts, and running static tests before each sortie. Stories grew of crews who labored through nights in freezing winds to save a sight from miscalibration, knowing that the lives of the men upstairs depended on their skill. In mess halls, cooks and riggers swapped tips for stabilizing mounts and insulating electrical connections against condensation. The war became less romantic and more intimate in these details. Survival hinged on the quiet competence of men who never fired a shot in anger, but kept the instruments that predicted death functioning. This behind-the-scenes diligence added a new layer to the suspense. If these fragile machines failed, the gunners would be back to instinct alone, and the sky would feel like a far colder place. Operational doctrine shifted quickly as higher headquarters absorbed statistical proof of the new technique's value. Fighters assigned to escort missions altered their tactics to complement the bomber gunners. Instead of making continuous harassment passes, Mustang and Spitfire pilots learned to time their strikes to create predictable closure speeds for the bomber's defensive arcs. Escort commanders and bomber leaders met in huddled strategy sessions to choreograph attacks and defenses so that an enemy fighter trying to weave through a bomber stream would face both the pilot's frontal fire and the tail turret's calculated lag. The air war became a choreography of timing. Interceptors baited into certain trajectories, gunners waiting for the precise mechanical prompt, and bombers adjusting headings by degrees to improve convergence geometry. The result was paradoxical. Combat seemed slower in execution, yet more lethal in consequence. For viewers, the tension ratcheted higher. Technology and planning had reduced chaotic dogfights to clockwork moments where a single decision, a single synchronized act, decided life or death. But not everyone welcomed the change. Among the old guard, resentment fermented. Seasoned pilots who had cut their teeth in the early years of the war, surviving on intuition and reflex, bristled at the idea of relying on spinning gyros and electrical adjustments. Some saw the shift as an erosion of courage, an outsourcing of combat to gadgets that could be stolen, reversed, or jammed. Stories began circulating of crews who refused to mate with new sights, preferring the soul of unaided marksmanship. In debriefs, gray-haired sergeants argued passionately that technological dependency would create brittle crews, men who could not fight without a mechanism whispering where to aim. The suspense here was psychological. Technology saved lives, but it also changed what it meant to be a warrior. Would men become mere executors of instruments? Could a human heart still feel the responsibility of a single burst that ended another life, or would the detachment of calculation make killing sterile and easy? These debates were not merely philosophical. When the Luftwaffe adapted, onerous but stubborn, they attempted to undermine the advantage. German pilots coordinated more erratic last-second maneuvers, attempting to defeat the angular predictions of the gyro sights by creating extreme rapid changes in turn rates. They tried diving passes, vertical splits, and feints designed to create deceptive rotational velocities that would confuse the reticle. In response, American engineers refined the gyroscopic algorithms, improved sensitivity to turn rates, and sped up stabilization to account for the Germans' improvisations. Countermeasures unfolded like a chess game in the sky. A move here prompted an immediate engineering tweak there. The aerial duel became as much a battle of mathematics and mechanical cleverness as one of reflex and bravery. Audiences watching this unfold would feel the suspense multiply. Every innovation invited a riposte, and every lap of the gyroscope could be tested by a human's desperate improvisation. Amid tactical changes and technical tweaks, personal stories kept the doctrine human. In one mission, a fresh-faced tail gunner named Ruiz, only 20 and jittery with fear, found his hands steady as the sight's dot slid into place behind a diving FW-190. He squeezed short, disciplined bursts. The German fighter shuddered, shed pieces, and descended in spirals of smoke. On the return to base, Ruiz couldn't stop staring at the sight, whispering thanks to its spinning internals as he might to a comrade who had pulled him back from the brink. In another crew, an old sergeant who had been skeptical from the start admitted, eyes watering, that the sight had kept his crew alive on 2 separate missions. These small human victories knitted themselves into the larger narrative. Technology did not replace courage. It remodeled it. Still, the final frames of newsreel footage captured a different, colder image. Gunners watching glowing reticles in a dark turret, hands steady, faces impassive as they executed the mechanical prediction. Viewers were left with a lingering question and a hook that tugged at the heart of the story. If men learned to kill via calculation, what would become of the moral weight of combat? Would it lighten or deepen? The answer in the short term was brutal and measurable. Squadrons that embraced the new doctrine posted dramatically improved survival rates and mission success. Losses dropped on escorted runs. Bombers returned heavier with the payload or with fewer crew casualties. Tactical planners who had been skeptics now stamped their approval on memo after memo urging mass deployment of gyro gun sights and accelerated retraining. The Air Force invested in production lines, feeding the demand with wartime urgency. However, success bred new ethical shadows. Photographs from the time capture bomber crews huddled in briefing tents, faces blank under the light, absorbing success statistics like surgeons reading casualty figures. Some men celebrated. Others retreated into silence. Training regimens grew more intense. Simulators, film debriefings, and psych drills designed to cement the split-second discipline required to trust the sight. The human cost of adapting to a machine's timing became its own kind of suspense. Could the men carry the psychological weight of executing death with clinical precision? As the chapter closed on this phase of the transformation, theaters of war shifted subtly. The bomber stream was no longer merely a mass of interlocking aircraft. It was a networked defensive system, where a sight in one turret could affect decisions made in the cockpit or in the waist gunner's station. Coordination extended beyond the plane to escort squadrons circling above, intelligence officers parsing enemy tactics, and engineers on the ground refining equipment late into the night. The narrative tension clustered around a single inescapable fact. The air war's center of gravity had moved. The B-17 and B-24 crews, tempered by loss and taught new ways to kill, were an emergent species of airman, part mathematician, part marksman, part machine whisperer. Our viewers are left hanging on that shift, breath held, eager to know how the Luftwaffe would respond, how new inventions might change the calculus again, and what the men who lived through this mechanized metamorphosis would carry home when the engines finally fell silent. The Luftwaffe was relentless. Intelligence reports reached German command that American gunners were suddenly striking with unprecedented precision, catching fighters mid-maneuver. Veteran pilots who had once relied on split-second instincts to evade tracer fire found themselves shredded by bursts they could not anticipate. Tactics were reviewed, meetings held in dimly lit bunkers, chalkboards smeared with angular velocity equations, flight path diagrams, and crude sketches of bomber formations. The Germans tried evasive spirals, rapid climbing dives, split S maneuvers, and feints designed to throw off the predictive advantage of gyroscopic sights. Yet the more they tried, the more the Americans adapted. Each alteration, each countermeasure was met with a subtle tweak of the sight's mechanics, or a retrained gunner adjusting their timing, lagging fractions of a second behind the target's new trajectory. Suspense built in both air and ground stations. A single second of miscalculation could mean the difference between life and death. Inside the bomber, Sergeant Kurtz and his crew had reached a new level of coordination. Every breath, every twitch was part of an orchestrated ballet with the gyroscopic sight. When a German fighter weaved suddenly, the sight's reticle predicted the subtle lag angle, nudging Kurtz's aim into the optimal position. He fired short, controlled bursts, and the enemy aircraft erupted into smoke before it could dive or climb to safety. The fuselage vibrated with the recoil, a tactile reminder that life and death were determined by the gunner's trust in technology and in each other. Crewmen whispered prayers over headsets, and the suspense stretched across every second of the sky. The old instinct of leading the target had been discarded. Survival now required patience, calculation, and absolute faith in the instruments guiding their hands. German pilots, desperate to regain dominance, tried unconventional tactics. They coordinated simultaneous flanking attacks from multiple angles, attempting to confuse the gunner's perception of relative motion. Dive bombers and fast Messerschmitts synchronized attacks to exploit blind spots in formations. Yet the American crews, drilled rigorously in the new doctrine, anticipated closure points rather than visual cues. Tail gunners found themselves predicting turns and speed changes even before they were executed, bullets trailing the enemy's past position as if time itself had bent around the aircraft. The psychological tension was extraordinary. Pilots experienced vertigo, dizziness, and a creeping sense of inevitability. No matter how clever the maneuver, the precise machine-human partnership waiting in the turret would find them. The suspense for the viewer here is palpable, a war of wits and machines unfolding hundreds of feet above the clouds. Night missions intensified the strain. Darkness amplified fear, and the gyro gun sights became both savior and obsession. Crews flew for hours in tense silence, eyes locked on glowing reticles while tracers arced behind enemy fighters. Oxygen tanks hissed, engines roared, and turbulence shook the planes like distant earthquakes. One rookie, observing his first confirmed kill, felt a mixture of horror and exhilaration. The enemy aircraft disintegrated exactly where the sight had predicted, a mechanical certainty that left no room for emotional distance. Veterans, too, wrestled with dissonance. The technique guaranteed success, but divorced them from the immediacy of instinctual combat. The first-minute hook remained. Viewers could sense every pulse of tension, every human heartbeat juxtaposed with the cold precision of machinery. The moral suspense lingered. Were these men killing, or were they executing the laws of physics, mechanical and merciless? The dawn broke over northern France with a sky streaked in gray and gold, but the beauty was deceptive. Below, formations of B-17s and B-24s hummed with deadly purpose, each aircraft a mobile fortress of men and machines, each turret a theater of split-second decision-making. Sergeant Kurtz adjusted his gloves, checking the gyroscopic sight with meticulous care before climbing into position. From the tail turret, the world was a rush of clouds and contrails, enemy aircraft approaching from angles both predictable and maddeningly erratic. The Luftwaffe, aware of the Americans' new method, tried every evasive maneuver they could conceive, but the gunners had grown accustomed to anticipation rather than reaction. Every pass, every turn of the enemy fighter was analyzed by instinct sharpened into mathematical precision. The suspense gripped them all. One miscalculation could ignite engines, pierce fuselages, or end lives in an instant. As the first wave of German fighters surged, Kurtz's hands moved as if of their own accord. He let the target pass ahead slightly before squeezing the trigger, the tracer rounds streaking behind the enemy's tail. Explosions flared in the distance. A Messerschmitt spiraled downward, smoke trailing across the clouds like a macabre banner. Around him, gunners repeated the pattern, each shot a precise negotiation between human reflex and mechanical guidance. Observers in accompanying aircraft took note of the seamless coordination, the synchronized timing of bursts that had previously seemed impossible. Reports of the morning mission filtered to command. Enemy losses were dramatically higher than predicted, bomber losses lower. The secret was out. The Americans had created a system where the line between pilot skill and technological advantage blurred into a terrifying efficiency. Even as victories mounted, the mental toll became evident. Gunners reported tremors, sleeplessness, and heightened awareness, a constant tension that didn't dissipate even after landings. Every engagement forced them to trust their instruments over their intuition, creating a delicate psychological dance. Pilots and crew wrote in journals about the eerie sensation of watching death predicted with unerring accuracy, the visceral mix of fear and control. Some welcomed it as liberation, reducing uncertainty in combat. Others described it as a loss of agency, a quiet surrender to a machine's calculation. These dualities added layers of suspense. Success came at a human cost, and every mission reinforced the strange partnership between man and device. Audiences watching this unfold would feel that tension, understanding the cost behind the glowing reticles that spelled survival and destruction alike. Strategically, the impact was seismic. Bomber Command began revising mission plans, confident that crews could survive heavier defenses and more aggressive Luftwaffe formations. Enemy tactics had to evolve, and German commanders grew increasingly desperate, scrambling to develop countermeasures against the American combination of gyroscopic prediction and human coordination. Yet each adaptation was met with refinement, improved sights, recalibrated angles, and crew retraining. The war in the air became a contest not just of courage, but of mathematics, precision, and psychological endurance. Every sortie reinforced the lesson. In this new era of aerial combat, victory belonged to those who could marry human intuition with mechanical foresight. The suspense of this revelation, the dawning realization that the balance of power in the sky had shifted, hung like a storm cloud over both sides, promising more battles, higher stakes, and lives dependent on the perfect intersection of man and machine. The morning sky over the Ardennes was a canvas of smoke and sunlight, thick with the hum of engines and the metallic rattle of gunfire. B-17s and B-24s moved in tight formations, disciplined yet vulnerable, their gunners prepared for waves of interceptors. Sergeant Kurtz, his eyes locked on the gyroscopic reticle, felt a cold thrill of anticipation. This was the extreme test, the point at which theory, training, and instinct collided in the crucible of combat. Enemy fighters darted from the clouds like predatory shadows, attempting split-second dives and sharp turns designed to break the predictive advantage of the sights. Yet Kurtz's hands remained steady, adjusting for angular velocity, compensating for sudden shifts, aiming precisely behind each fighter's tail. Short, controlled bursts tore into the German planes, explosions marking the calculated choreography of destruction. Suspense hung heavy in the cabin, each heartbeat echoing the tension outside as if the sky itself were holding its breath. On another aircraft in the same formation, a rookie gunner faced the terror of his first confirmed kill. His breath caught as a FW-190 spun into the predicted kill zone, the sight's dot glowing like a mechanical oracle. He squeezed the trigger, and the fighter erupted into flame, twisting into the clouds below. Relief and horror collided within him. The human capacity to marvel and recoil simultaneously had never felt more acute. Veterans in nearby turrets murmured encouragement, their expressions a mixture of pride and grim understanding. The psychological load was immense. Every kill was both a victory and a reminder that survival depended not on heroism alone, but on unwavering trust in the machine and meticulous execution of training. The suspense was palpable, and viewers would feel the weight of every second in these high-stakes encounters, knowing that a fraction of a miscalculation could undo everything. Meanwhile, Luftwaffe aces, seasoned in years of aerial combat, began adjusting their tactics in desperation. Coordinated feints, abrupt climbs, and zigzag patterns were intended to throw American gunners off rhythm. Yet the gyroscopic sights, constantly refined through training and feedback, predicted these maneuvers with uncanny accuracy. The duel became as much about mental fortitude as technical skill. German pilots tried to anticipate the gunners' predictions, while Americans relied on mechanical foresight to read the enemy's moves before they occurred. Each dogfight unfolded like a chess match at hundreds of miles per hour, with every turn, dive, and burst of gunfire a calculated step toward victory or defeat. Suspense built exponentially as viewers could imagine the nerve-wracking milliseconds between a fighter's maneuver and the gunner's response, a gap in which lives hung in balance. Amid these engagements, crews began reporting subtle but profound changes in their perception of combat. The partnership between man and machine had introduced a rhythm to the chaos, a strange harmony of anticipation and execution. Gunners who once relied on gut instinct now trusted gyroscopic calculation. Pilots adjusted their formation patterns to complement the new defensive advantage. Yet this harmony carried its own tension. Over-reliance on technology risked complacency, while hesitation could be fatal. High-altitude missions across dense anti-aircraft zones amplified the suspense. One misread signal, one delayed burst, could trigger catastrophic chain reactions within the tight formation. The cumulative effect of these extreme missions was clear. Survival now demanded mastery not just of aerial combat, but of psychological endurance and mechanical trust. The hook remained tight for viewers, every sortie a blend of suspense, danger, and awe, as gunners lived on the knife edge between instinct and precision. The skies over northern Germany shimmered with the approaching sunrise, casting a cold gold light across the bomber formations. For the first time, entire wings of B-17s were deployed on precision raids, with the new aim-behind method fully integrated. Commanders had coordinated hours of training, simulations, and practice missions, creating a seamless network of gunners, pilots, and gyro gun sites operating in near-perfect synchronization. Sergeant Kurtz manned his tail turret, his eyes scanning for the slightest movement, the faintest blur of a German fighter trying to breach the formation. The first attack came in swift, coordinated bursts from multiple angles. Yet the gunners had been trained to anticipate, to calculate, to fire behind the target's trajectory, turning every evasive maneuver into an opportunity. Explosions erupted as enemy aircraft spiraled into the predicted kill zones, a precise ballet of destruction choreographed by human skill and mechanical foresight. The suspense was electric. For viewers, every frame of tracer fire and twisting fuselage screamed immediacy and danger. The psychological impact on the crews was profound. Veterans whispered that it felt like watching ghosts fall from the sky, not enemies. The precision of the gyroscopic sights divorced action from instinct, creating a strange duality of detachment and empowerment. Every burst fired with lagged precision was a calculated certainty, yet it left the human mind reeling from the moral weight of exact prediction. Rookie gunners, watching their first confirmed kills unfold as if by magic, trembled at the mixture of exhilaration and horror. The human element remained central. Trust, fear, anticipation, and reflex intertwined with mechanical calculation. Each engagement layered suspense and drama into the narrative, keeping audiences hooked on both the tension and the astonishing results of this innovation. Breakthrough missions demonstrated the peak effectiveness of the aim-behind method. Entire bomber formations, once considered vulnerable to heavy Luftwaffe defense, now returned with minimal losses. Enemy fighters attempted new countermeasures, unexpected maneuvers, baited dives and rapid climbs, but gunners, trained to anticipate, adjusted in real time, converting potential threats into confirmed kills. The synergy between pilot, gunner, and machine had reached a tipping point. Commanders noted in their logs that kill ratios had doubled, mission success rates had skyrocketed, and morale among crews was higher than ever. Yet the suspense never diminished. Every sortie was a gamble, every engagement a deadly chess match. The tension for viewers lay in the immediacy of risk, the precise calculation of every shot, and the human stakes that hovered behind the mechanical efficiency. Even as the technique proved decisive, the moral and emotional stakes weighed heavily. Crews reflected on the strange duality of their role. Precision now guaranteed survival, but also required deliberate, calculated destruction. Letters home described the surreal experience of watching enemy aircraft fall with methodical certainty, the human mind trying to reconcile skill, luck, and the mechanical predictability of war. Pilots, gunners, and crew members were transformed. Instinct alone could no longer dictate outcomes, replaced by the tense collaboration between mind and machine. Suspense, in this context, was not only in the air but in the human heart. Viewers could feel the thrill of success mingled with the horror of mechanical death. A complex tension that elevated the narrative beyond mere statistics into a human story of courage, trust, and consequence. The summer skies over Germany were thick with the roar of engines and the streaks of tracer fire. Entire Allied air campaigns now relied heavily on the precision of gunners trained to aim behind enemy fighters, and commanders had begun planning missions that were once considered impossible. Wing after wing of B-17s and B-24s pressed deeper into enemy territory, confident that the combination of human skill and gyroscopic calculation could outmatch even the most seasoned Luftwaffe formations. Sergeant Kurtz and his crew found themselves flying consecutive sorties that tested endurance, nerves, and trust in the mechanical guidance of their sights. Every engagement was more intense than the last, each enemy maneuver an unpredictable variable. Yet, through training and discipline, the gunners executed the lagged shots with almost uncanny consistency, converting dangerous intercepts into survivable, even victorious encounters. For viewers, the suspense built steadily. Would the next wave break through, or would the gunners' deadly precision hold again? Extreme missions pushed both the technique and the men to their limits. Pilots and gunners faced dense flak, poor visibility, and enemy fighters executing desperate, chaotic maneuvers designed to outwit the predictive advantage of the sights. Fatigue became an enemy as potent as the Luftwaffe. Hours in freezing turrets, straining eyes, and shaking hands tested human endurance beyond normal thresholds. Yet even under these conditions, the method proved resilient. Gyrogun sights, constantly refined and calibrated, provided the margin of error that kept the gunners effective, even as their bodies screamed for rest. Moments of personal heroism emerged in small, tense actions. A tail gunner saving a bomber from a converging attack, a waist gunner predicting a fighter's turn with split-second precision, a pilot adjusting course to maximize a gunner's firing window. Suspense remained unbroken, compelling viewers to feel every pulse, every heartbeat of fear, anticipation, and relief. Strategically, the effect on the air campaign was dramatic. Allied bombing runs penetrated deeper into enemy territory, infrastructure targets were destroyed with greater efficiency, and Luftwaffe losses mounted. The doubling of aerial kill ratios shifted the balance of power in the sky. Commanders who had been skeptical now relied on the new doctrine for planning large-scale raids, knowing that bomber formations had an improved survival rate, not just due to numbers, but because of the deadly accuracy of every trained gunner. Enemy pilots and commanders scrambled to adapt, yet each innovation by the Luftwaffe was met with an immediate counter, a refinement in technique, or a tactical adjustment in formation flying. The suspense of this evolving contest created a tension both on the battlefield and for viewers. The sky itself had become a chessboard, with human life and mechanical precision intertwined. Even as strategy succeeded, the human cost deepened. Crews spoke of the fatigue, the tension, and the moral weight of repeated, mechanically precise kills. Letters and journal entries revealed the psychological toll of witnessing destruction with scientific certainty, the uncanny dissonance between instinct and calculation. Veteran gunners developed a quiet discipline, a calmness born of repetition and survival, but younger crews struggled with the balance between awe and horror. Suspense lingered in every briefing, every sortie, every second of flight. Could they maintain the precision under stress, fatigue, and chaos? The stakes were not only in lives saved or lost, but in the fragile minds of men entrusted with lethal certainty, a tension that riveted audiences and kept attention locked on the story of innovation, bravery, and the relentless push of human endurance against the machinery of war. By late 1944, the aim-behind technique had been fully integrated across bomber wings. Training programs standardized the method, gyroscopic sights were mass-produced, and every gunner, whether rookie or veteran, underwent rigorous retraining to internalize the split-second calculations that had revolutionized air combat. Sergeant Kurtz, now a seasoned veteran, watched over formations as a mentor, teaching new crews the subtle art of timing and anticipation. Each lesson emphasized trust in the machine, trust in training, and trust in the crew surrounding them. Missions were no longer just about surviving. They were exercises in executing deadly precision with confidence. The suspense was almost unbearable. Crews learned that hesitation, doubt, or misalignment could undo the thousands of hours of planning and training that gave them their advantage. For viewers, the tension resonated. Every aircraft, turret, and tracer line was a delicate balance between life, death, and mechanical perfection. Legendary missions emerged that would be recounted in mess halls, military archives, and war histories for decades. Entire squadrons faced overwhelming Luftwaffe numbers over key industrial targets in Germany, and yet, using the lag shooting method, losses were minimal while enemy kills were unprecedented. Tales of heroism spread, gunners saving multiple aircraft from converging attacks, pilots coordinating their maneuvers to create perfect lines of fire for their crews, and machines performing flawlessly under stress. Each story carried suspense and drama, showing the lethal beauty of calculated combat. Observers on the ground, historians later recounted, were awed by the precision and discipline of these missions. Seeing what appeared almost impossible to the human eye, fighter after fighter destroyed in sequences that seemed preordained. The audience, watching these reenactments or listening to narratives, experienced both exhilaration and horror at the fusion of human skill and mechanical foresight. Yet the emotional and ethical climax weighed heavily on crews. The knowledge that their weapons struck with exacting certainty created a duality of feelings: mastery and dread, confidence and moral unease. Letters home reflected this tension. Men described awe at their ability to execute perfect defense, coupled with the disquiet of observing the systematic destruction of human lives. Some gunners embraced the clarity and survival advantage. Others wrestled with the cold inevitability of their own efficiency. The technique had transformed the art of aerial combat, but it also reshaped the men themselves. Suspense in this section is psychological. Viewers witness the human mind adapting to war's mechanized precision, feeling both the thrill of control and the weight of responsibility. In the broader theater of war, the full impact of the technique rippled through Allied operations. Bomber command planners incorporated the improved kill ratios into strategic calculations, permitting deeper strikes into heavily defended regions and lowering attrition rates for returning crews. Enemy forces, confronted with predictable losses against previously effective tactics, struggled to respond, leading to cascading effects on morale and planning. The sky had become a place where human ingenuity, mechanical innovation, and psychological endurance converged. For audiences, the suspense was layered. Every sortie carried the weight of survival, technological mastery, and moral consequence, pulling the viewer through both action and reflection. The stage was set for the final chapter of Point 1, the ultimate consequences of the aim-behind method, the consolidation of human and machine, and the lingering question of what such precision in killing would mean long after the war ended.